WhiskyJason here, whiskey from the viewpoint of an American over here in Germany. And today I have a brief history lesson about the different distilleries on the island of Islay. So I was actually there at the beginning of May, and it's fascinating to see how the history of this island is interwoven with politics and so on. I won't talk that much about that, but I do want us to give an overview of what was actually happening. So this is the island of Islay. We have the political capital called Bowmore. We have the harbor at the top called Port Aske. We have Port Ellen down at the bottom. I left from that harbor. I arrived at Port Aske. We have Bunnahabhain, and we have Port Charlotte. So we also have the island Jura that I actually visited. Now, most of us probably will know that the oldest distillery on Islay is in Bowmore, established 1779. Now, way before that, there was illicit distilling going on, without a doubt. There was actually the Excise Act here of 1644, and there was not, according to my information, not even a single taxman managed to get into the island until about 1790. So that is actually a very, very interesting thing. So the first Gauger, or the first excise man, did not dare to set foot on Islay until 1797, according to one of my sources. So, yeah, 18 years after the distillery was founded. So the interesting thing about Islay is, back then, and I did not know that, is I should have known it, is there were actually people that owned the entire island, and the farmers that lived there worked for this person. So we actually have, in this case, a man. He bought the island, more or less, interesting enough, with the money that he was given because his house was burnt down due to a tax, what is it called? So a tax riot, let's just call that. And so, yeah, that was very, very interesting. And we have to deal with Daniel Campbellton of Shawfield, purchased the island 1725, using money he had received in compensation for the destruction of his Glasgow mansion during the malt tax riots in the city. So one of the things these people did was they invested a lot of money into the island for infrastructure and hopefully getting industry set up. So textile manufacturing was important back then, and whiskey. So the second oldest distillery here on my map is going to surprise you. Well, maybe not. It's Jura. So the same thing that was going on in Islay was going on in Jura. 1810, the laird of Jura actually set up the distillery as well to increase the economy, to help the people have something to do there, and to actually export, which is a good thing. So 1779, Bowmore, Jura, 1810. So now the next thing that's going to happen is a little bit of a surprise for me, which I didn't know. Ardbeg. Now, Ardbeg, some of my sources quoted 1797. Now, Ardbeg itself, according to its logo as well, says established 1815. So let's just go with 1815. So what happened in 1815? Laphroaig was also then established, and also Lagavulin, 1816. So we have three of these distilleries clustered down in the south here. Yeah, Ardbeg, Laphroaig, and Lagavulin. There's a nice little walk we can take between the three distilleries. There's a lot of common history going on down there and so on. They all have a bay. They all have a pier. Everything was brought in basically then with a boat. So interesting enough is, when did the steam engines start taking over? And that was about that time. So, and that is very, very important there. All right. So they could actually transport their goods not by train, but actually by steam engines and so on. So the let's see here. The first steam engines were around Oh, I'm sorry, it's actually later. It's 1867 is when the Gales maiden voyage to Campbelltown and so on with the steam engine. So it's a little bit later. All right, so we still have a lot of just everything with the sea was transported and taken away and also imported in. So not talking about those distilleries yet, because the next one I'm going to talk about is a closed distillery, Port Ellen. So 1825 is when it was founded. So just 10 years later, it was closed, 1983. Now, I could talk about a lot of the different closed distilleries. We would have Daill, never heard of that, 1814. Octomore, which is then by Port Charlotte over there. Okay, good, 1816. Ardmore, a distillery I've never heard of. Newton, heard of it, don't know much about it. Tallant, Lossit, Port Ellen, Lochindaal, that is then Port Charlotte. Then a distillery that I have never, ever heard of, I'm going to do this instead, will be Ardenistile. All right, just 9 years of production, 11 years of production, and Malt Mill. Malt Mill is a special distillery. So back then, there was this guy, he actually lost out on, let's see if I can get this right here. So, my sources here. Let's go to Malt Mill. Find Mill. So, all right. So, 1908, Mekis is his name. He was actually forced out of the Laphroaig company. And so he actually built his own distillery literally on the site of Lagavulin. So he tried using exactly the same thing. They had different water, so it didn't taste the same. Now, the Malt Mill distillery was integrated in Lagavulin. When you go there to the distillery, you go up into the gift shop. That is basically the Malt Mill distillery. Behind that, and the different tasting rooms would be the warehouses, the malting floors as they had there. So a very, very, very interesting thing. Great question for quizzes and so on as such. All right, so going back now to our map here. So we have Port Ellen also down in the south. So moving on, the next distillery that was established in on Islay is Caol Ila. For me, makes perfect sense. So you have two main harbors. You have Port Eske in the north, and you have then Port Ellen in the south. Now, very, very interesting. Around the time of about 1830, there were over 15,000 people living on Islay. Today's 3,000, a fifth. So what happened? Well, a lot of people emigrated. A lot of people left those core standards of being servant farmers and so on. And so they went to America. They went to to other places, went to the mainland and so on. It wasn't a great place to live. Very, very hardworking conditions. But okay, good. So 1846, we have Caol Ila. So these are distilleries we've heard of. These are distilleries we probably know. In the south, all at the same time. Port Ellen was there, and the next one was 20 years later, Caol Ila. Then the reason for this presentation is the following. I have been doing a deep dive into these two distilleries at the moment, Bruichladdich and in particular Bunnahabhain. They were both built 1881, which I find fascinating. All right, so in both of these distilleries, we had people from outside of Islay coming in and going to Islay and building distilleries, custom design distilleries. Apparently, and that's what I did not know, even if we go with Caol Ila, we go to Laphroaig, we go to Lagavulin and Ardbeg and so on, Bowmore, there were buildings already there. And so they built around them, they used them, adapted them. These two new distilleries, our Bruichladdich and also our Bunnahabhain, were both at the time state-of-the-art industrial sites. They used gravity at both of these. The barley went up at the top, the distillate came out at the bottom. They were using steam engines. It was really, really, really interesting to see what was going on in both of these distilleries at the same time. Bunnahabhain up in the top, a little bit sheltered here through Jura. Bruichladdich also a little bit sheltered here from the coast. But still good access to water, good access then to the port to get rid of, or the pier to get rid of all their products. A very, very, very interesting thing that both these distilleries at the same time opened up. The Victorian era was happening. The people back then loved that oily, heavy, peated moment. Not very many single malts. Most of it was still blended together. Not like the Speyside, the honey, the vanilla, the light. No, they wanted that heavy stuff. And so both of these distilleries, they invested money into that to actually produce whiskey to sell all over the world, even all the way to Australia, which I found fascinating. So within 20 years of both distilleries being founded, the whiskeys were around the world. So, and now there's a long gap between Bunnahabhain and Bruichladdich and Kilchoman. Now, Kilchoman cannot say this was the first distillery founded on Islay in the last 130 years, because don't forget, we had the Malt Mill in between there. So they could say in almost 100 years. Now, up until today, Kilchoman is still the only distillery that's not located on the water. Now, there were other distilleries that were not located in the water in the past, but they all closed down. Is there a correlation between those two factors? Don't know. Kilchoman building a new distillery 2005. That wasn't yet the whiskey boom, was absolutely a feat of faith. Let's just say that, all right? Amazing what happened there. I love the concept from grain to glass. I love what they're doing at Kilchoman. Great stuff. All right, so, and now we have one last distillery, also a cluster, Ardenistile, up there, 2018. Beautiful distillery. Down at the bottom in the south, you can actually walk from Ardbeg to Lagavulin to Laphroaig. I'm not sure, but I hope one day they will make it possible. You can walk from Caol Ila to Ardnahoe to Bunnahabhain. Or vice versa. You start at Bunnahabhain and you work way down to Ardnahoe, and you work way further down to Caol Ila, and you land up down in the harbor of Port Ascay. That would be fantastic, wouldn't it? Just to walk from one distillery to the next distillery, tasting, enjoying, and just savoring those different types of liquids there. So, yeah, that's the fact. I still am mind-boggled that 1830 there were 15,000 people. Today there's 3,000 people. I think more of us should go to Ireland, not just during Fashil, but also during other times of the year to enjoy this wonderful place. There's hardly another place in all of Scotland, good, Speyside, Dufftown as the exception, where there are so many different types of distilleries. One thing I forgot to mention that I would like to mention again is here. Now, today, Bruichladdich and Bunnahabhain are the two distilleries that produce the mainly unpeated whiskies. Yes, we have the peated Bunna. Yes, we have the Port Charlotte and we have the Octomore. But the Bruichladdich and the standard Bunna are both unpeated. Interesting that those distilleries still today produce unpeated whiskey compared to everything else where it's totally peated, right? So that's that. So I hope this tiny little overview here gave you actually a nice little incentive to think about maybe visiting that island. There is a magic about the island of Islay. It's a beautiful place. It is not just distilleries, but for us as whiskey geeks and nerds and fans, that would be the main reason we would go there. I had the chance to see, photograph, and to be at all the distilleries, even though Caol Ila was closed, and it was a wonderful experience. And I hope you one day may actually be able to do that as well. So I hope I piqued your curiosity a tiny little bit and have hopefully been able to show a little bit about my excitement about what's going on Islay. WhiskyJason here, whiskey from the viewpoint of an American over here in Germany. All the best. See you soon. Bye-bye.